Some people sleep next to you for 10 years, and you don't even know what they are thinking. The heroine in my story today is called Emily. She is the secretary. He is not the secretary to the president of a large group, but he is not a new assistant either. Her boss, the only man she has had in the past 10 years, is named David. David started his career in technology. From writing code in the garage, he now owns an entire office building and is worth hundreds of millions. Emily accompanied him from 0 to 100. In these 10 years, she stayed by his side without any name or status. A few years ago, David would hold her in his arms late at night after working overtime and say, "Emily, wait a little longer. When I am a little more stable, I will give you a grand wedding and let everyone know that you are my woman." At that time, she felt sweet in her heart when she heard these words. She felt that this man was ambitious and responsible. It wasn't that he didn't want to marry her, he was just waiting for the best time. But wait and wait, 5 years have passed, 7 years have passed, and 10 years have passed. She started to get scared. She was not afraid that he would not marry her, she was afraid that she would not be on the marry list from the beginning. But she didn't dare ask. Because she has nothing left. Her parents are traditional old-school people. Back then, when she followed a poor boy with nothing, she ran to the city. Her parents felt embarrassed and cut off their relationship with her. Her former friends were also isolated by David intentionally or unintentionally, and gradually lost contact. From 10 years ago, there was only one name left in her world, David. So that night, when she saw the message, she was completely confused. The message was sent by David. "The company is working overtime tonight. Go to bed early and don't wait for me." Emily didn't think much about it. She's used to it. She was about to turn off her phone, but suddenly she remembered that David had forgotten his coat at home. The weather forecast said it would rain tonight, and she wanted to send it to him. She drove downstairs to the company and found that the entire building was dark. She was stunned for a moment and did not go upstairs. She dialed David's number, but no one answered. She called again, but still no one answered. Then she looked up and saw David walking in at the door of the 5-star hotel across the street with a woman in his arms. She knew that woman. Victoria. The eldest lady of the Victoria Group. "I pursued David 5 years ago but was rejected. Later, he married someone else and divorced again. Just returned home recently." Emily held the phone, and the interface was still on the message sent by David. "Work overtime." Her fingers were cold, but her mind was surprisingly clear. She didn't rush in. She didn't cry. She did the craziest thing in her life. She called the police. "Hello, I'm reporting that someone is soliciting prostitution." Hook must have strong conflict. The sound of police sirens broke the tranquility of the night, and the lobby of the 5-star hotel instantly became a mess. Emily stood in the corner of the lobby, watching the guests wearing bathrobes and coats being taken out of the elevator by the police. Some were cursing, and some were hiding their faces from the camera. There was no expression on her face, and she felt nothing in her heart. She just stood there, waiting. She had used David's identity information to find out the room number. 10 minutes later, she led the police upstairs. The moment the door was knocked open, Emily would never forget that scene in her life. The light in the room was warm yellow, and there were high heels, a tie, and a woman's lace underwear on the floor. The bed was in a mess. David was shirtless and holding Victoria in his arms. His first reaction was not to explain. He lowered his head, looked at her and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Emily stood at the door. When she heard these words, her whole figure seemed to be nailed by something. The policeman raised the law enforcement recorder and asked in a routine manner, "Mr. David, this lady reported you for soliciting prostitution. Please cooperate with the investigation." Victoria huddled in David's arms, raised her head, revealed a pitiful face, and said with a cry in her voice, "Sure Chuan, is she crazy? We are husband and wife. Couple." Emily's pupils suddenly shrank at that moment. She heard it right. She said couple. David patted Victoria on the back, raised his head, and looked at Emily. Those eyes, which she had looked at for 10 years, were once full of tenderness and affection, but now they were as cold as water in an ice cellar. "She is my secretary." David's voice was calm and without a trace of ripples. "She has always had delusions about me." He turned his head and said to the police, "Officer, this is my ID, and this is my wife's ID. We are a legal couple. Today is our first wedding anniversary. Is there any problem with staying here for one night?" 1-year anniversary. Emily felt like her brain had been hit hard by something. She subconsciously took a step forward, her legs became weak and she could hardly stand. She lowered her head and saw a small red book thrown on the ground. She bent down and picked it up. The red book says, "David Chen Victoria King registration date, XXXX year XX month XX day a year ago. They got married a year ago. Emily's hands began to shake. She stared at the date, as if trying to make a hole in the paper. Then she suddenly raised her head, rushed forward like crazy, grabbed David by the collar, and tore the red book into pieces, and the shreds of paper fell to the ground like snowflakes. David. Her voice was hoarse, as if something was stuck in her throat. You said you wanted to marry me. You said you wanted to give me a grand wedding. You made me wait. I've been waiting for 10 years. Is this what I've been waiting for? Her tears finally flowed down, hot, flowing down her cheeks and dripping on the back of her own hands. Her hands were still holding his collar. Her knuckles turned white and her whole body was shaking violently. What's the deal between us? What's the deal? Tell me. Pop, a loud slap silenced the whole room instantly. Emily was hit and turned her head away, her face burning with pain. She froze there, her mind going blank. She heard a buzzing in her ears, like 10,000 bees flying. She slowly turned her head and looked at David. His hand was still in midair, and the expression on his face was not anger, only impatience, and a little disgust. Emily, his voice was very low, as if he was talking to a child or giving an ultimatum to a mental patient. Your paranoia has become serious again. I have told you a long time ago that I don't mean that to you. The trouble you caused tonight has already affected my family. He turned his head and showed an apologetic expression to the police. Sorry, officer, you are occupying the police force. She is my secretary, and I know she has always liked me, but I didn't expect it to be serious enough to cause hallucinations. Emily opened her mouth to say something, but found that her throat seemed to be blocked by something. She shook her head desperately, wanting to say that everything I said was true, that I was not crazy, and that I was not delusional. She took out her mobile phone, opened the chat history with David, and showed it to the police. Look, this is the message he sent me. This is what he said. Wait a little longer. This is what he said. I love you. Look. David sighed, took his cell phone out of his pocket, unlocked it, and handed it to the police. Officer, this is my WeChat account. You can see if you have ever chatted with her. Emily leaned over to take a look. It was a portrait she had never seen before. That's not the David, she added. The policeman looked at the two people's mobile phones, and then at Emily, with a kind of professional indifference and sympathy in his eyes, the kind of sympathy usually reserved for mentally ill patients. Ma'am, you are suspected of making a false police report. Please come with us. Two policemen stepped forward and took Emily's arms. No. Emily struggled violently. I won't leave. I'm not a psycho. What I said is true. He is a liar. He lied to me for 10 years. Her voice was shrill and shrill, echoing through the hotel corridors. The doors to several rooms opened, and several heads popped out, looking curiously. Someone was holding up a mobile phone to take pictures. Emily was being dragged outside. She turned her head desperately, trying to find David. She saw him. He stood at the door of the room, holding Victoria's waist with one hand, and gently stroking her hair with the other hand. He lowered his head and said softly, "It's okay, honey. I'll boil you some hot milk when you get home to calm your shock." From beginning to end, he didn't look at her. The first round of emotion, the air conditioner in the police station's detention room was turned on full blast. Emily hugged her legs and sat in the corner, still wearing the thin dress. Her cell phone was taken away, her bag was taken away, and nothing was left. She didn't know how long she sat there. An hour? 3 hours? Or all night? All she knew was that when she looked up, David was standing outside the iron bars. He changed into a gray cashmere coat, his hair was neatly combed, and he still smelled of cologne. He seemed out of place in this cold holding cell. Emily looked at him and didn't move. David pulled a chair from the side, sat down, stretched out his hand through the railing, and wanted to touch her face. Emily jerked back, hitting the wall with her back. His hand stopped in mid-air, paused, and then took it back. He wasn't angry, he just sighed softly and looked at her with a little heartache and a little helplessness in his eyes. Is it cold? Emily suddenly smiled when she heard these two words. It's not a happy smile, it's the kind of smile that makes you feel particularly pathetic. It's hard for you to still remember me. Her voice was hoarse, like sandpaper. It's hard for you to still know my name. David was silent for a moment and said, Victoria has a bad temper. If you are not taken away by the police, she will not let you go. Emily was stunned. She looked at David as if she were meeting this man for the first time. So, she spoke slowly and in a very soft voice, are you trying to protect me? David said nothing. Did you let me be taken away by the police to protect me? Did you call me delusional to protect me? Did you let me sit in the detention room all night to protect me? David frowned, as if he was not satisfied with her tone. But he was still patient and said, "Emily, I know you feel uncomfortable. But you have to understand me. The size of Victoria Group is there, and by marrying her, the market value of my company can double. It's not that I don't love you, I just what?" Emily interrupted him. "Just need to marry a woman who can bring you benefits? What about me?" David looked at her and was silent for a few seconds. Then he took out a document from the briefcase next to him and pushed it in front of her through the railing. Emily glanced down. There are a few words written on the cover. Voluntary partnership agreement. She knows this stuff. In layman's terms, it's called a nurturing agreement. "Emily," David's voice was as gentle as coaxing a frightened animal, "I know you love me. I love you too. If you sign it, you can still stay with me." Emily stared at the document for a long time. Then she laughed. The laughter echoed in the empty detention room, with a little echo, and it sounded particularly sad. Tears flowed down her smile. "David," she raised her head and looked at him, "is this the position you have prepared for me in your heart?" David said nothing. "Your lover? Your mistress? Your underground lover?" David still said nothing. "What if I don't sign?" David's eyes changed at that moment. That kind of tenderness, that kind of heartache, that kind of helplessness, recede like the tide, revealing the rocks underneath. "Emily," his voice remained steady, "you are a smart person." He stood up and looked at her condescendingly. "You just have to sign. Without me, you have nothing." He turned and left. The sound of leather shoes hitting the floor was like hitting Emily's chest. The sound got farther and farther away, and finally disappeared at the end of the corridor. Emily sat there, looking at the agreement, with those words echoing in her mind. "Without me, you have nothing. Nothing." She began to think. Her friends are all friends of David. Her career was the job David gave her. Her family, her parents, had disowned her 10 years ago. Over the past 10 years, her world had been hollowed out bit by David without leaving a trace. She has nothing. Brief relief, false hope. The next morning, Emily came out of the police station. She stood at the door for a while, the sun hurting her eyes. She squinted, took a taxi, and headed back to the apartment where she and David had lived for 6 years. The elevator went upstairs and the door opened, and she was stunned. The door was open and people were coming in and out. "He is a worker from a moving company." They were moving her things out. Clothes, shoes, books, computers, and cosmetics are all packed into cardboard boxes. Emily rushed in and stopped in front of a worker. What are you doing?" A hand reached out from behind and took her arm. "Yes. David. You won't live here anymore," he said, his tone as normal as if he was saying that the weather is nice today. "I bought you an independent house with a garden in Qinghu district. If you move here, I will visit you often in the future." Emily shook off his hand, took a step back, and looked at him. "I won't sign." David looked at her, his eyes cold. "I said, I won't sign." Emily said word by word, "When you get married, we will break up." David said nothing. He just raised his hand and waved to the 2 bodyguards next to him. "Send her there with the luggage." Emily was loaded into the car. She struggled, she cursed, she screamed, to no avail. The door was locked, the car started, and drove all the way to the suburbs. The car drove for almost 2 hours and finally stopped at the door of a beautiful independent house. The small white building has a lawn and a swimming pool. The iron gate is closed tightly, like an exquisite cage. The bodyguard got out of the car and opened the door. Emily took advantage of this opportunity to push the door open and run away. She ran so fast that one of her high heels escaped and she didn't bother to pick it up. All she knew was that she had to run, and run as far as possible. She ran for about 10 minutes and hailed a taxi on the side of the road. "Go downtown." She is going to the company. There are several colleagues in the company who have a good relationship with her. She needed help, someone to tell her that none of this was real, that she wasn't mentally ill, that she wasn't crazy. The taxi parked downstairs of the company. Emily got out of the car and walked quickly inside. When she reached the door, she brushed her face. Drip recognition failed. She was stunned for a moment, then brushed it again. Drip recognition failed. The little girl at the front desk poked her head out and glanced at her, looking a little embarrassed. Emily," the little girl's voice was low, "well, you are fired." Emily raised her head and looked at her. "Expelled? When did it happen?" "Yesterday," the little girl's eyes evaded. "David sent a notice saying that you said that you suffered a mental illness and were taken away by the police. Everyone in the company knows about it." Emily stood there, her mind buzzing. She is not sick. She is not sick. She is not sick. Ignoring the obstruction at the front desk, she pushed open the door next to her and rushed in. The elevator went upstairs, the door opened, and she walked into the office area. Everyone raised their heads and looked at her. Those eyes showed curiosity, sympathy, excitement to watch the fun, and the gossipy expression of finally here. Someone was whispering to each other, saying something in a low voice. Why is she here? You still call her? You're fired. I heard it's because I like Mr. David so much that he goes crazy. Yesterday, he even went to make trouble in front of his wife. How pitiful. But when did David get married? You don't know? You are a perfect match for the eldest lady of the Victoria Group. Alas, David is always soft-hearted. Seeing as she has worked for so many years and has not held him accountable, she still dares to come. Emily listened to these words and moved forward step by step. She had no explanation. She didn't say, I have been with him for 10 years. Because no one will believe it. She was just a secretary, a paranoid secretary. She walked to the door of the president's office, but the door was not closed. She opened the door. David was sitting behind the desk, Victoria was sitting on his lap, and the two were talking intimately. Seeing Emily, Victoria let out a small exclamation and shrank into David's arms. David raised his head and frowned. Why are you here? Emily ignored him. She looked at Victoria. Miss Victoria, she said, you know what? David and I have been together for 10 years. Victoria blinked, a sympathetic and helpless expression on her face. I know, her voice was soft, as if coaxing an ignorant child. He told me all. You are delusional. Emily smiled. He knows better than me whether I am sick or not. She paused. Just yesterday, he handed me a custody agreement and asked me to continue to be his lover. Emily. David's voice suddenly rose in pitch. He stood up and pressed the call bell on the table. Security. Come up. Emily didn't look at him. She kept looking at Victoria. How much do you think he loves you? She said. He loves the Victoria Group behind you. Victoria said nothing. There was no change in her expression, except for the corners of her mouth moving slightly. The security guard rushed in, grabbed Emily's arm, and dragged her out. Emily struggled, and her neck was pulled, causing her to gasp in pain. She looked down and saw that the necklace around her neck had been torn off, and a silver ring fell to the ground, rolled around twice, and stopped at Victoria's feet. That was what David bought when he made his first pot of gold. An ordinary silver ring is worthless. She has worn it for almost 10 years and has never taken it off. The office suddenly became quiet. David looked at the ring and his expression was startled. Just for a moment. Then he looked away and said nothing. Emily was dragged out. At the last glance, she saw Victoria turning her back to David and smiling towards her. There was no sympathy, no pride, or even provocation in that smile. There is only one, clarity. She knows. She knows everything. The second round of reversal, more ruthless, Emily was left on the side of the road. She sat on the ground in front of the company for who knows how long. She didn't know where to go. She tried looking for a hotel. Sorry, madam, the system shows that you have a history of mental illness and require a guardian's signature before you can check in. She tried finding friends. When I called the number, it was either an empty number or the number you dialed is temporarily unavailable. She tried looking for a bank. The card is frozen. David never leaves anything to chance. She sat in the corner of the convenience store, looking out the window at the street and watching the people coming and going. She thought, what should she do? What can she do? The convenience store bell rang. David walked in. Follow me. Emily didn't move. David came over, grabbed her wrist, pulled her up and put her into the car outside. The car drove all the way to the suburbs and back to the white independent house. After entering the door, David pressed her on the sofa, then squatted down and looked at her levelly. His tone softened, and his eyes returned to the man she had loved for 10 years. Emily, he said, this is our home from now on. As long as you stay with me, I will give you $500,000 a year. You can buy whatever you want and go wherever you want. He raised his hand and touched her face. I love you. I can give you anything except marriage. Emily looked at him, looked at that familiar face, looked at that familiar affectionate look, and her stomach suddenly turned. She raised her hand. Crack. David was hit and turned his head away. He paused for a moment, then slowly turned back, his face not angry, but smiling. He took her hand and put it on his face. Fight, he said, if it will calm you down. Emily pulled her hand away and looked at him. David, she said, from the moment you get married, we are over. Whether you want to marry the Victoria Group or find another wealthy lady, it has nothing to do with me. Just let me go. David's eyes changed. That kind of tenderness, that kind of affection, sinks little by little, and when it sinks to the bottom, another layer of things comes up. Emily, he said, his voice very soft, I told you that you can't live without me. He stood up, turned around, and walked out. When he reached the door, he stopped and said to the two bodyguards next to him, "Keep an eye on her. The door is closed." Emily stood up and rushed to the window. Outside the window is a lawn, a swimming pool, a 2-meter-high iron fence, and a closed iron gate. Her phone was taken away. Her computer was taken away. Her bag was taken away. In this house, apart from a nanny who comes to cook for her every day, there are only 2 bodyguards guarding the door. She is trapped. In the first few days, she tried to escape. Rush out while the nanny opens the door. He didn't run 10 meters and was caught by the bodyguard. Climb the window in the middle of the night. Just as I jumped down, the alarm went off. Pretend to be sick and go to the hospital. The bodyguard said, "Sir, if you feel uncomfortable, call the doctor." She couldn't run away. Then she started a hunger strike. On the first day, the nanny came in with food, but she refused to eat it. The next day, the pattern was changed and she wouldn't eat it. The third day, the fourth day, the fifth day. "David is here." He stood by the bed and looked at her. She had lost a lot of weight, her face was pale, and there was a black circle under her eyes. "Emily," he said, "would you like a bite?" "I was wrong, it was my fault that day." She looked at him and said nothing. "Let me go." "Impossible." She closed her eyes and turned her head away from him. David was silent for a moment, then waved to the bodyguard next to him. 2 bodyguards came up and held her down, one on the left and the other on the right. Emily opened her eyes and looked at him. "What?" David said nothing. He picked up the bowl of porridge, came over, opened her mouth, and poured it into her mouth with a spoon. The hot porridge flowed down her throat, and she choked and coughed until tears came out. After finishing the bowl of porridge, the bodyguard let her go. She immediately lay down on the bedside, stuck her fingers into her throat, and spit out all the food she had just poured in. David stood nearby and watched her vomit. His expression changed. "Okay," he said, "okay. Let's take a nutritional injection." The cold liquid flows into the veins. Emily closed her eyes, not wanting to look at him. That night, he didn't leave. She struggled, she fought, she begged him, she scolded him. Useless. The next morning he was gone. Emily lay on the bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then she stood up and walked into the kitchen. When the nanny wasn't looking, she picked up the knife. Emotional collapse, character cracking. When Emily woke up in the hospital, her wrists were wrapped in thick gauze, white and glaring. There was a gray sky outside the window, and the ward was very quiet except for the ticking sound of the instruments. She stared at the ceiling, her mind empty. She thought, how is she still alive? The door opened. David walked in. He looked much haggard, his hair was messy, there were black circles under his eyes, and green stubble appeared on his chin. He walked to the bed, sat down, and looked at her. "Emily," his voice was hoarse and trembling, "you finally woke up." Emily said nothing. She just looked at him. She thought that this man had been everything to her. She loved him, she had waited for him for 10 years, she severed ties with her parents for him, she gave up all her friends for him, she bet everything on him. Then he locked her up. He raped her. He forced her to sign a custody agreement. He married another woman. He left her with nothing. And now, he was sitting here, looking at her with a haggard expression, as if he really cared about her. "Emily," David looked at her, his eyes a little red, "I know you feel uncomfortable. I know you don't want to live. But you can't die." Emily still didn't speak. David was silent for a moment, then took out his cell phone from his pocket, clicked a few times, and handed it to her. "Look at this." On the screen is a photo. It's a small restaurant with a small facade. There is a sign hanging at the door that says, "Chenji Chinese Food." Emily's pupils narrowed suddenly. It was a restaurant owned by her parents. 10 years ago, when she and David left, this was just a roadside stall. Now there is a storefront. "Emily," David's voice was very soft, as if he was talking about a very ordinary thing. "In the catering industry, you know, the most afraid of inspections. Fire protection, sanitation, food safety. If there is any problem in any one of them, the store will be closed, and people will still have to go in." Emily stared at the screen, at the small restaurant, at those familiar words. Her fingers began to tremble. She slowly turned her head and looked at David. The way he looked at her was still gentle, distressed, and helpless. It seemed like he was really sad, like there was really nothing he could do. Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she closed her eyes. Tears slipped from the corners of his eyes and flowed into his ears, feeling cold. "Okay," she said. Her voice was very soft, as light as a fallen leaf. "I will listen to you." David smiled. He leaned down, hugged her, and buried his face in the crook of her neck. "Emily," he said, "you are the only one I have ever loved. Sooner or later you will understand." Emily didn't move. She opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling and the gray sky outside the window. What does she understand, she thought. Do you understand that he threatened her with her parents' lives? Understand that he locked her up and made her his lover? Do you understand that he married another woman while saying he loved her? She couldn't understand. All she knew was that she lost. Decision, key choice. From then on, Emily stopped running. She eats, she sleeps, she lets the bodyguards watch her, the nanny takes care of her, and she lets David come and leave whenever he wants. She is like a zombie. But her mind had never been so clear-headed. She is waiting for an opportunity. This opportunity was given to her by Victoria. That afternoon, the nanny went out to buy groceries and left the door open. Emily was sitting in the living room and heard something moving outside. She looked up and saw Victoria standing in the doorway. Victoria was wearing a Chanel suit, carrying Hermes, 10-centimeter high heels, and her makeup was as exquisite as a magazine cover. She stood at the door, looking at Emily, with a little smile on her lips. "Song Jinyan," she said, her voice sweet, "long time no see." Emily looked at her and said nothing. Victoria walked in, sat down on the sofa, and crossed her legs. "You're really good," she said, looking at the room. "This house is nice. It's bigger than my apartment. Did he spend a lot of money?" Emily still didn't speak. Victoria looked at her, the smile on her face fading little by little. "Do you know why I came to you?" "I know." Emily finally spoke, her voice was very calm. "You can't help it." Victoria's expression changed. "You know who the mistress is." Victoria sneered, "So what? I am his legal wife. You are just a wishful thinking secretary. A delusional patient." Emily looked at her and didn't refute. "I came today." Victoria stood up, walked up to her, and looked at her condescendingly. "I want to give you a chance. How much will it cost you before you are willing to leave him?" Emily raised her head and looked at her. "You should ask David this," she said. "You should ask him how much it will cost before he is willing to let me go." Victoria's expression changed completely. "Bitch." She raised her hand and slapped Emily in the face. Emily grabbed her hand and slapped her back. "Pop ye!" Victoria screamed and fell to the ground. Just then, the door opened. David stood at the door, looking at Victoria who fell on the ground, and then at Emily who was standing next to her. She won. He walked over quickly and helped Victoria up. "How are you?" Victoria covered her face and looked at him with tears in her eyes. "David, I just came to care about her, but I didn't expect her. She suddenly rushed up and beat me." Emily stood nearby, watching this scene, and suddenly laughed. Ha 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 ha. She couldn't stop laughing. She bent over with laughter, and burst into tears. David raised his head and looked at her. "Enough." Emily slowly straightened up and looked at him. "Apologize to her." Emily was stunned for a moment. "What did you say?" "I apologize for the past night." Emily looked at him, into his eyes. She had looked at those eyes for 10 years. They were once full of tenderness, once full of affection, once full of "I love you." Now it's just cold. "Why should I apologize?" she said. "I am a psychopath." "Have you ever seen a madman apologize after beating someone?" Victoria was sobbing beside her and whispered, "David, it's my dad's birthday in a few days. If the injury on my face doesn't go away, he will feel bad when he sees it." David's expression changed. He looked at Emily and said word by word, "Apologize. Think of your parents." Emily's smile froze on her face. She looked at him. He looked at her. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. Emily lowered her head. "I'm sorry." Victoria covered her face and said in an aggrieved voice, "My face hurts so much, will there be scars?" David raised his hand and touched Victoria's face. The 5 fingerprints were so red and purple that they were imprinted on her fair skin. He stroked for a moment, then turned his head and looked at Emily. "Kneel down." Emily raised her head and looked at him. "What?" "Don't make me repeat it." Emily looked at him. She looked at him. Slowly, she bent her knees. Boom. Her knees hit the floor loudly. Victoria said "Oh" and pretended to come over to help her. "What are you doing?" "David, how could you do this? She is a patient, don't argue with her." She held Emily's arm, leaned into her ear, and said in a voice that only 2 people could hear, "So what if you have been with him for 10 years? You still have to kneel down for me." Emily lowered her head and said nothing. Victoria helped her up, and David came over and took her into his arms. "Let's go, I'll take you to the hospital." He didn't even look at Emily. "The door is closed." Emily stood there, looking at the door. She thought she wouldn't be in pain anymore. "But why does it still feel like something has been severely gouged out of my chest?" The 3rd round climax, biggest conflict. After that, David didn't come for half a month. Emily didn't ask either. She just eats, sleeps, and is in a daze every day. Until that day, when the bodyguard was walking with her, he suddenly gave her something. She looked down. A mobile phone. It's very small and very old, like a backup machine from many years ago. She held it in her hand and waited until she returned to the room to open it. There is only one text message in it. Do you want to escape? Emily's heart skipped a beat. She stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then she replied, I think so. What can you give me? She thought for a while and replied, David's criminal evidence. Bribery, bid rigging, commercial fraud. In 3 days, David and Victoria will arrange a make-up wedding. The bodyguard who sent you here will take you to the airport. I will wait for you there with the evidence. Okay. 3 days. Wedding. Emily looked out the window, the sun shining in and falling on the floor. She suddenly felt that the sunshine today seemed to be brighter than before. 3 days later. The bodyguard drove her out. Promotions for David and Victoria's wedding can be seen everywhere along the way. Their wedding photos scrolled on the electronic screen, their posters hung on the roadside, and their wedding preparations were broadcast on the news. Emily looked at those with no expression on her face. She just opened the car window and let the wind blow in. Airport. A man stood at the arrival gate with a straight suit and a smile on his face. Lu Jinyan. David's biggest rival. Miss Emily. Lu Jinyan looked at her and smiled. We meet again. Emily didn't greet him, but stretched out her hand directly. Where is my mobile phone? Lu Jinyan took out his mobile phone from his pocket and handed it to her. Emily took it and turned it on. In the past few months, no one has looked for her. No messages, no calls, nothing. She entered the password, opened the network disk, and transferred all the things that had been stored in it for many years to Lu Jinyan. That evidence was enough to keep David in there for the rest of his life. The transmission is finished. Emily took out her mobile phone card, broke it into pieces, and threw it into the trash can. Then she sent a text message. For David. Goodbye. Lu Jinyan looked at her and sked twice. How cruel. Emily ignored him. How do you send me away? Lu Jinyan took out an envelope from his bag and handed it to her. This is your new identity, passport, and air ticket. There is $1 million in the card, which is a little bit of my gratitude. Emily took the envelope, opened it and took a look. The plane takes off in 3 hours. Lu Jinyan said, I wish you good luck, Emily. I hope there will be a day when we see each other again. Emily looked at him and nodded. Goodbye. The plane passed through the clouds, and the sun shone in and fell on her. Emily leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at the vast sea of white clouds. She thought she was finally gone. Closing, emotional release, not summary. 2 years later. Country M. Emily stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself inside. Black suit, pearl earrings, hair meticulously styled. She is no longer the canary locked in a cage. She bought a financial company that was about to go bankrupt and worked day and night. In 2 years, she turned the company into a legend in the industry. Everyone in the financial circle knows that as long as you get investment from Dreamweaver, you can prepare to go public. So when she decided to return to China to participate in the new energy exhibition, the whole circle was shocked. On the day of the exhibition, there were huge crowds of people. As soon as Emily appeared, she was surrounded. Miss Emily, are you interested in new energy batteries? Miss Emily, this is my business card. I hope to cooperate with you. Miss Emily, what are your investment directions? Emily responded with a smile, without missing a beat. Then, there was a commotion outside the crowd. She raised her head and saw someone. David. After 2 years of not seeing each other, he has aged a lot. There were white hairs in his hair, wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, and he looked as haggard as a lost dog. His eyes passed through the crowd and landed on her. At that moment, his eyes welled up with ecstasy. He pushed through the crowd and rushed towards her. Emily, he walked up to her, stopped, raised his hand, and wanted to touch her face. Crack. Emily slapped his hand away. Mr. David, she said, her voice calm, please call me Miss Emily. I don't know you that well. David was stunned for a moment, then laughed, a little crazy. Emily, do you know how long I have been looking for you? I don't know, and I don't want to know. She turned to leave. David grabbed her arm. Don't go. A hand reached out from behind and grasped David's wrist. Mr. David, is it not polite to grab a lady like this? Lu Jinyan. Emily looked at him and smiled. Thanks. Lu Jinyan also smiled. It's really hard to see you without even saying a word when I return home. The two of them chatted like no one was around, like old friends for many years. David's face turned completely dark. That night, at dinner, Emily and Lu Jinyan were inseparable, meeting people, chatting, and drinking. From the corner of her eye, she saw David standing in the corner, staring at her. That look reminded her of the days 2 years ago. She put down her glass and said she was going to the bathroom. Turning into the corridor, a hand reached out from behind, covered her mouth, and dragged her into the utility room next to her. The door is locked. Emily was pressed against the wall, and in the darkness, she smelled the familiar smell of cologne. "Emily," David's voice rang in her ears, hoarse, crazy, and a little trembling. "You're back. You are finally back." Emily didn't move. "Do you know how I have spent these 2 years?" There was a hint of crying in his voice. "The company is gone, the money is gone, Victoria ran away, and everyone is avoiding me. Only you, only you." He buried his face in the crook of her neck. "Emily, I love you. I have always loved you. Would you like to come back? Shall we start over?" Emily stood there, listening to him finish. Then she raised her hand. Crack. David was stunned. In the darkness, he couldn't see her face clearly, he could only hear her voice, which was calm and cold. "David, you love yourself." She pushed him away, opened the door, and walked out. In the corridor, Lu Jinyan stood not far away, looking at her. "Are you okay?" Emily shook her head. "Come on," she said, "take me to get something to eat. I haven't had Chinese food in a long time." A few months later, Emily receives an invitation. David and Victoria Group's wedding did not take place in the end. The two companies went bankrupt one after another. Victoria's father was imprisoned, and Victoria herself was missing. The invitation was from the mental hospital. In the visiting room, Emily sat on one side of the glass and looked at the man on the other side. He was so thin that he lost his appearance, his hair was mostly white, his eyes were unfocused, and he was mumbling something. When he saw her, his eyes lit up. "Emily." He rushed over, lay on the glass, and patted hard. "Emily, are you here to pick me up? I knew you would come pick me up." Emily looked at him and said nothing. She took out an invitation from her bag and stuck it on the glass. A bright red gold-gilded wedding card with 2 names written on it. Emily Chen Lu Jinyan Li. David stared at the invitation for a long time. His eyes darkened little by little. "Are you getting married?" His voice was hoarse, like sandpaper rubbing against glass. You're going to marry Lu Jinyan?" Emily looked at him. "David," she said, "you promised me a grand wedding. I've been waiting for 10 years, but I didn't get it. Now I've waited." David opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Emily stood up and put the invitation back into her bag. "Goodbye, David." She turned around and walked out. Behind him, there was a hoarse shout. "Emily, Emily, don't go, I love you, I really love you." She didn't look back. The wedding was held on a private island. The sun is shining brightly, the sea breeze is light, and the air is filled with the fragrance of flowers and sweetness. The music started playing, and Emily, wearing a white wedding dress, walked forward step by step. Her parents were by her side, each holding her arm. Lu Jinyan stood at the other end of the red carpet, looking at her with a smile in his eyes. Behind him, there were a lot of guests. There are friends she has made in the business world in the past 2 years, noble people who have helped her, and strangers who sincerely wish her well. She walked to Lu Jinyan and stopped. He reached out and took her hand. "Would you do that?" She looked at him and smiled. "I do." The sun fell on her body, warm. She raised her head and looked at the sky. The sky is very blue and the clouds are very white. She suddenly remembered that night many years ago, when she stood at the door of the hotel and watched David walk in with Victoria in his arms. At that time, she thought that her life was over. Now she thinks that at that time, her life had just begun. The wedding is over and the guests disperse. Emily stood on the beach, watching the sunset sink little by little. Lu Jinyan came over and hugged her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" She leaned into his arms and whispered, "Think about the past." He kissed her hair. "It will be fine in the future too." She smiled and said nothing. The sea breeze blows over, bringing with it a bit of a salty taste. She closed her eyes. She thought she could finally have a good sleep. Those betrayals, those hurts, those tears, those despairs were all left on the other side of the sea. And she could finally start over. Marriage is not the end. Some people say that marriage is the grave of love. But I feel that it was never the marriage that was wrong. It was the person who pushed you into the grave and refused to erect a monument for you. If you are also waiting for someone, waiting for a long, long time, waiting until you forget who you are, waiting until there is no one around you, remember Emily's story. Some people's wait a little longer means they make you wait a lifetime. And your life doesn't need to be spent waiting for anyone. See you next time.